All right, guys, welcome back. EYL, we have a special guest, Dara Mirjahangiry.
Pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah.
I'll give it like a 9 out of 10.
I've heard a lot worse.
So, the head of Sei Less restaurant in New York, this is a place that we've been to a few different times.
Yes.
Become very popular and trendy. I'm sure you've seen a variety of different athletes and rappers talk about Sei Less. I think Fabulous had it. Did he say that?
I felt like Fab has a residency at Sei Less.
Yeah?
Yeah, he may have. And numerous pop-ups at events. We've been to events, All-Star games when Sei Less has a pop-up. So
They was in, you just on 50 Cent recently?
Yeah, we did a pop-up in Shreveport.
Shreveport, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I thought that. So, yeah, very culturally relevant eatery. But outside of that, just a very interesting story from an entrepreneurship standpoint. Started from finance and then had to transition to the hospitality, kind of worked his way up the ranks with a variety of different restaurants, and now is one of the top restaurateurs in our city. So this is going to be a great conversation. So first and foremost, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, all right. So it's always good to talk to the restaurateurs. We've had a variety of conversations with a bunch of them, but each person I feel like has different stories and different takes on industry and business. But how did you get to this point? Because I know, so you went to Syracuse University and you were in finance, mortgages.
Yeah, so I studied finance and marketing, and my first job out of college was selling mortgages.
What year was that?
2005 to 2008.
Wild Wild West.
So you started in 2005 and ended in 2008.
Correct, yeah.
So 2005, you was booming. Like right away, you was making money.
Booming. First 6 months out of college, made over 6 figures, and kind of got spoiled and ruined a little perspective on what's reality and how easy it was.
And then, so to give people a perspective of the might have forgotten, 2007, 2008, that was the financial crisis, which was speared by the subprime mortgage crisis. And a lot of people lost their homes, and the mortgage industry was a whole big thing. So walk me through, like, you're doing good, and then at what point do you realize this thing is falling apart, and how bad did it actually get for you?
Yeah, so, coming out of college, obviously I knew what mortgages were. I worked in the subprime foreclosure bailout. So I wasn't really helping people buy houses, but I was helping people that were in a difficult situation, saving their house based on the equity in their property, paying off their debt. And probably 2006, 2007, I would hear people in the office that were much more seasoned than myself talking about all the subprime loans that were coming due in 2012, 2013. And I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but they would be talking about it on the phone, having conversations about it. And, they were older guys, and I was like, what are these guys talking about? And slowly I saw, the process of my loans getting tighter and tighter and more restricted and less loans getting approved. And since we were kind of on the forefront of the foreclosures and the subprime, our business started dwindling, in 2007 when really things kind of ended in 2008. So we were kind of like on the forefront of everything collapsing. So I saw it pretty early in the process.
So as it's collapsing, are you starting to plan at that point, or you're saying, all right, I'm going to stay in mortgages, I'll find another route, or I'm going to make a pivot to something completely different?
Yeah, so I didn't understand the severity of the situation when it was unfolding. It was my first job out of college. So I just thought that I would pivot to a different place, or, actually in my head, and I was doing so well in the company that I thought that, I was good.
And then at what point do you realize you're not good?
It was a commission-based job, so when I was going to work and it was costing me more money to go to work than I was making, I kind of realized that it didn't make sense anymore.
So, like, how old are you, like 26, something like that?
No, I was 23, 4 probably at that point.
So at 24, okay, so you realize this doesn't make sense to do it. You got to change career paths. How do you get into the hospitality business?
So that wasn't my initial pivot. I thought, I went to college, I graduated a degree. Hospitality was something I did throughout college as a way to, make ends meet. But I pivoted to, the tech world, the entrepreneurship world. I started a company called Postgrad Apartments, which was pretty much, before Instagram. It was when there was Facebook groups. I had a big network of friends that were at different universities. So I would essentially pay an ambassador on a college campus to promote our website to all the people in their network at the school. So, someone had a big following, they would invite 300-400 people at different their college to join this group. when those people wanted to graduate college and move to, it was Boston, Chicago, or New York, they would put in a lead. We'd refer the lead to a real estate agent. And then if the deal closed, we would get a commission on each transaction. So we did that for probably over 50 college campuses. We would go to the schools, throw, parties, and, we had hats and cups and branding. And the business was going pretty well, but we weren't the real estate agents, and we were only getting a small percentage of each deal. So it wasn't as lucrative as it could have been. So the model was not sustainable.
At any time, as you're doing the mortgages and you pivot to the tech platform for the colleges, you're making money. Are you saving money, or are you're blowing money? Like, do we have the financial discipline at this point to say, all right, I've learned my lesson from this. This time I'm actually be different, or as the money comes, is it going?
So it was, obviously my first job out of college. So I did put away some money through the process, but at the same time, you're getting these commission checks that were like $20,000, $30,000 a month, being at 22, 23 years old. So you would spend some of the money, enjoying life, but then you put some of it away. But then when you go from that to a drastic downturn in your income and trying to be an entrepreneur and build a tech company, you quickly go through your savings. So that nest egg that I put away was quickly gone, in about a year. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't figured out exactly what was the next move. And that's kind of what pushed me into the restaurant business.
And then, so then you go to Philippe Chow's?
Correct.
So how does that happen?
One of my jobs throughout college was, one of my first jobs was detailing cars. I grew up in New Jersey, Short Hills, New Jersey, worked for a lot of executives that worked in Manhattan. So I had a car detailing business throughout high school. And then when I was in college, that turned into a driving job where I would drive some of those executives around as a summer job or during the holidays to different meetings, family functions. And then one of those people that I worked for knew the owners at Philippe Chow. I had no idea what Philippe Chow was. I had no idea what working in New York City restaurant was like. But I got the opportunity to work at Philippe Chow, which was and is a premier restaurant on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
And what'd you do there?
I was a waiter.
You was a waiter?
Mm. Yeah.
So how long were you a waiter?
So I was a waiter for 9 months. Worked, I think I started in March, went to the Hamptons for a pop-up location that they did that summer. And then at the end of the summer, a manager position opened up. And within 9 months, I was managing that location. You
was managing Philippe Chow's?
Correct.
And then you left Philippe Chow's?
Yeah, after I had a nice 5-year run there, and I ended up leaving.
So as a manager, as the people are coming in, are you building clientele? Like, what are the roles? Are you promoting this? Are you helping marketing people coming in? Are you bringing clients and celebs in? Like, what is the role as the manager?
Yeah, so they obviously, there was always 3 managers on staff, and I was the lowest on the totem pole. So I always had the worst shifts, the closing shifts, the weekends, the holidays. And then I was at the age, I was about 27 years old at the time, so I would go out every night with the different, artists and athletes that would come to the restaurant. This was before Instagram existed, before Uber existed. So, one of the artists would come in, they would say, like, where's the spot tonight afterwards? And they're like, all right, meet me there at 1 o'clock. I would meet them outside, get them in. And this was an era where house music was really predominant and hip hop wasn't really the thing in clubs or, in the social circle. So I would go with different artists, and the artist would buy a table and go to the club. It's different than things have been in the past few years, but artists weren't getting paid to go to the clubs. They were paying to be there. So that's kind of how the relationships evolved. And then when I would be in the club, I would get introduced to the people that were at the table next to us and the table next to us, and a lot of people from out of town. And then, they would come into the restaurant the next night. So, I would build relationships in the restaurant, but I would really, expand my network when I would go out. And that was a big part of what I would do.
So what made you want to leave, Philippe?
There was an ownership change, different philosophy. And then they wanted me to sign a non-compete agreement, but they weren't really offering me anything in terms of staying.
So then that's when you go to Julian Club.
There was another restaurant in between called Red Sticks, which was short-lived, but the guy who hired me at Philippe Chow opened up Red Sticks, so I ended up moving over there with him.
So the non-compete, break that down a little bit. They once you couldn't work at any other restaurant, that would be considered a competitor to them?
It pretty much said I couldn't work at another Asian eatery, and I couldn't open up my own restaurant that was in the Asian food space.
It's like a Tao Group would not.
I couldn't even go work for Tao Group, pretty much what it was saying.
Okay.
So so after that, you realize that's not for you. So are you thinking about becoming an entrepreneur at this point, or are you still thinking about just being a manager?
At that point, I was at a crossroads of, leaving hospitality and doing something more, 9 to 5 corporate. So, I just kind of kept going down that road. I stuck to hospitality and, did Red Sticks. That didn't work out. And then went back to the corporate world where I was working for a company called Harry, which was like a Craigslist for hospitality jobs. So I was doing that, but I would go to that job, 8 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. And then my clients would call me and ask me, can you get me a reservation at Philippe or one of the other restaurants? So I would go to dinner with them and then I'll go out with them and then wake up again, 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was a vicious cycle. So, after doing that for probably about a year, I decided to go back to the hospitality business. And that's when Julian opened.
And then your role there was manager?
Correct.
So you're in the managerial role. So from a manager's perspective, you're learning, okay, you're courting talent to people to come into the restaurant. Are you also learning as far as logistics of how to run a restaurant, like food cost and operations and stuff like that? Or are you more just bringing people to the establishment?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I quickly, moved up the ladder in terms of being a waiter to a manager was that I understood, the back end of the business in terms of, doing payroll, doing inventory, the food costs, and a lot of the financials that go behind the business. A lot of my coworkers were more focused on the hospitality and the restaurant business, but not the economics behind it. So that kind of allowed me to move up. And then understanding technology. A lot of the people I worked with were much older than me. They didn't understand how to even use emails or use social media. So I set up a lot of the social media platforms for the places that I was working at the time.
How did you learn the financial aspect of the business?
For me, it was just
observing
a little bit of what I learned in college and a little bit of common sense.
So as you're at Julian, but you're building this clientele in terms of information, at what point do you realize or how much financing is going to take for me to start my own? Or did you put a plan together saying, by this date, by this year, I want to create my own situation? Or are you happy at first when you start there?
Yeah, so at first I was definitely happy, young, had a lot of access, was going out, enjoying myself. But, kind of saw, the revenue that I was bringing into the restaurant and what I was getting out of it. And I wanted more. So, my first objective was try to get more from where I was, ask for equity, ask for partnership. And it was one of those things like, if you're not happy, the door's there. So I kind of stuck it out and then, had an opportunity to leave and I did. And there was a period of time where, after I left, I was like, well, what did I do? I had it pretty good. So, a little second guessing yourself and, questioning if you made the right decision.
So when you decide to start a restaurant, right, you start Sei Less, how does that work? You have a partner that you have, like how much money did you have to use? Like how'd you get the space? Like what goes into actually?
Yeah, so it was all compounded by the pandemic. 2020, everything shut down in New York and a lot of places in the country. So the restaurant that I was working at the time closed for 3 months. So, I was home with the family, mask, confinement, watching the news every day, reading online, and not really understanding what was going to happen. At the time, my family was telling me, like, listen, all right, enough with the restaurant business, get a real job. My parents thought that I was, running an Applebee's. So, trying to explain to them, like, you don't understand. I have this network of people that, are going to support me. And, my dad would always tell me, like, these people don't care about you. Like, you're wrong. Like, get a real job. So I had that struggle internally with my family. And, I understood where he was coming from because obviously, I grew up in an immigrant family and, you're either a doctor or a lawyer, some kind of professional. So, seeing me working in hospitality was almost like I was a failure to them. So the way Sei Less evolved was I was looking for different restaurant spaces. But at the time, there wasn't really a lot of inventory and a lot of ideal projects. I'm a big believer, like, it doesn't make sense to take a blank canvas and build a whole restaurant from scratch. Just, the overhead and building the kitchen and the hood system and all that stuff doesn't make sense. So, finding a pre-existing restaurant is ideal. And there really wasn't a lot of inventory in the market at the time when I was looking. So one of my partners introduced me to my other partners. They had a pre-existing restaurant. And we looked at it, and within 3 months, we gave it a facelift and converted it to Sei Less and reopened pretty quickly.
How much did that cost?
because it was a pre-existing restaurant, a lot less than what a normal restaurant would cost. I'd say a normal restaurant build out in New York, obviously every restaurant's different, costs about $2 million. We probably were able to do it for about half of that.
So that's a two-part question. First, the name, Say Less. Obviously in New York, when we say that, Say Less, it's like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I want to know how y'all came up with the name and was that the origin? So we start there. The second part is Asian fusion, right? It seems to be the common theme amongst your career. It's like Philippe, right? Then we had Julian, and now Say Less. Why not any other type of food, I guess, demographic?
Yeah.
Is there something specific about Asian fusion that the analytics show you that this is the most popular type of food in the city?
Yeah, I think, obviously I believe in sticking to what you know. I have a big following of clientele for that specific food. Obviously Asian food, Asian fusion is a broad, space, but, the kind of food that we serve, it's really Chinese food with a little bit of fusion to it. I have a tremendous following in that. If I open up another cuisine, I think, some of those people will come, but I think part of the reason that I've been successful in my career is that I've mastered what I do in a certain cuisine. Also understanding the food costs and the economics of everything. There's different kinds of restaurants, Italian restaurants, steakhouses, sushi restaurants. I understand the ins and outs of the Chinese food space and, the profit margins. And it's something that just, economically makes sense to me. And I've kind of continued to build it out. So I think that that's the answer is that, it was something that I was successful at and, it just made sense.
How about the name?
The name, that started when Kevin Durant, who was one of my regular customers when I started my career, he was playing for back in New York, playing for the Brooklyn Nets, and he would come into the restaurant and he would always say, I want a clubhouse to go to after the games, like somewhere that's home, somewhere that's mine. So it was kind of like a membership type thing. That's how it evolved of like, if you go there, and the name that initially popped into my head was Say No More. So I was like, what's a good culturally relevant space, name for a spot that's kind of like, not mainstream, but if you know about it, you know about it. So Say No More popped into my head, and then I was like, that's just too wordy. So I was like, how do you say no more in less words? So Say Less. So I wrote down SAYLESS, and this was all during the pandemic. Like I'm sitting at home with my family and like got a pen and paper out and trying to formalize this idea, and not knowing that one day it's going to come to life, but just it was an idea. So I wrote SAYLESS on a piece of paper, kept looking at it. I'm like, that you can't call a venue that. It doesn't make any sense. So I was like, well, how do you say in a different way than just SAY? So I thought of sensei, which is Asian, but sensei is SAI. So I wrote SAILESS, kept looking at it. I was like, it still doesn't look right. So changed the A to an E, and then we got Say Less.
Yeah, because that's how I look. Because when you said to prove people wrong, I kind of look at it like what you just said, like Say Less, like you like got you, like kind of.
Yeah, I'll take care of it.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it too, but also
like heard you.
Yeah.
Like almost like when people are like, oh, where should we go to dinner tonight? Say Less. Like it's kind of like proving people wrong, but also like agreeing on something without just giving the head nod.
That's what I'm saying.
It's an understanding.
Yeah.
It's like Say Less. Like,
and honestly, you, like when I came up with it, I thought it was a great idea, but I didn't imagine it turning into a cultural, icon as it's quickly become.
So you had the name before it became a phrase?
No,
it was a phrase already.
It was a phrase, but it wasn't as a commonly used
as
phrase.
Popular.
Yeah.
So you think you helped popularize that phrase?
I don't think
just
so.
kind of
I think it was a timing
coincidence
thing, and I think the pandemic, the same way outside became a thing, Say Less became a thing.
Outside definitely became a thing. So let me ask you this: as far as the restaurant is only as good as its chef, so did you like take the chef that was already at the other restaurant? Like, how did you establish the relationship with the chef at Say Less?
Yeah, so the chef wasn't someone that worked at the other restaurant. Over the years, I've built relationships with different chefs. Chefs come and go. They go and do different things. So actually, this chef was working in Seattle during the pandemic, and I was going to open Say Less in LA. When the pandemic hit and New York shut down, I thought it was over. So I actually went to LA during the pandemic, and I was trying to put together the concept out there. And within a week of me being there, the riots broke out in LA, and the same problem I had in terms of finding a space in New York was compounded in LA, and there was nothing available.
So as you're creating Say Less, and even hearing you talk now, you're big on relationships and obviously attention to detail. What are some of the experiences that you took into the creation of Say Less? Right? Like what experiences did you say, all right, we made this mistake, or I saw this mistake being made, I'm not going to do this here when I create this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're opening a business or a restaurant, or it could be any kind of entrepreneurship venture, they overthink it. I try to identify, what is the need in the market and filling that need. People spend money on design and building out these extravagant restaurants, and at the end of the day, they go $4, $5, $6 million in to construct the place. It takes a year longer than they needed to. They spend all that money on rent, and by the time they open, they're so behind that they don't give themselves a realistic chance of succeeding.
So outside of that, because restaurants is like 90% failure rate, right? And there's a variety of different factors that go into it, as far as it's hard to really get a constant stream of people in. And then you have food costs, and then you have other variables like, maintaining the chefs and keeping the wait staff happy, making sure people don't steal from you too much, because everybody's going to steal. It's like one of these things. So how have you been able to break that mold and be a successful, like what's your blueprint to success as a restaurateur when most people have not figured that part out?
Yeah, I think you need to understand the business first. Then you need to understand your clientele. And, having worked up the ranks from being a server to a manager to an owner, I understand all the deficiencies in the process. So creating systems that are kind of foolproof, steal-proof, and then, you're only as good as your team. So assembling a team of people that understand your vision and your goals, and obviously making sure the business is successful. So, filling the seats is something that, is more of a challenge than people realize when they open a restaurant. Our restaurant is about 250, 300 seats, depending on the configuration. And, filling those up every night with a constant flow of people, like you need to know a lot of people and have a big reach. So obviously social media is a big part of what we do with TikTok and Instagram. And then we have a cheat code, obviously, with our celebrity clientele. But at the end of the day, if you don't have good food, good service, the restaurant needs to be clean. A lot of those things go into it, and then just, putting the work in. A lot of people get so tied up on, the wrong things when they're opening up any business, especially the restaurant business. But, at the end of the day, you got to put the work in. When we opened, I worked 7 days a week for the first 6 months without a day off, no time off, just kept working, to build something great. And then once you are so-called successful, maintaining that is another challenge. There's a lot of places that open, they're hot, and then they're quickly not. Mm-hmm. So, you have to stay on top of the business. I always say when things are good, doesn't mean they're great. And when things are bad, they're not bad. You just have to be consistent in what you do and, stick to a process and keep working.
What would define the success? So if you open in 2022, is it we're profitable in the first 6 months, we're profitable in a year? Is it, hey, we were just featured in New York Times? Or was it, hey, we got the streets, people are talking about it, everybody wants to get you're looking at reservations, we're booked for 6 months. How are you defining success in the early stages?
I think it's a combination of things, but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to your balance sheet. A lot of places appear to be successful, and then a year or two later, you see that they closed. So at the end of the day, for us, it's being profitable, being consistent, and then keeping the brand hot, which I think we've successfully done. We're embarking on our 3-year anniversary on January 15th, and we continuously, week in and week out, produce.
So how do you maintain that relationship as far as getting a celebrity clientele? Is it something that you constantly do, or is it just organic?
Yeah, we don't focus on the celebrity. At the end of the day, having celebrities is a big part of our business, and it's great, and we appreciate their support. But you just have to put in the work, build something that everyone wants to be there, because you can't survive just on catering towards celebrities. You need, the regular people that have a birthday party, family, date night, corporate parties. So you just have to be consistent in what you do and, make sure the food is good and provide good service.
So as far as like critics, because previously, like, magazines and, stuff like that meant a lot, but now you have social media influencers that can make or break the situation. So have you guys, like, how does that affect you? Like, Do you reach out to influencers? Have you been involved in campaigns with influencers? Like, how have you used social media and specifically food critic influencers? That's a big thing, especially on TikTok. So, or you just don't, and then you just let however it shakes out.
For ours, it's been a blessing. It's been organic. When we opened weekly, we would have a TikTok video go viral, and it was a big part of our business and, the reach and the exposure. It's not something that we did. It just organically would flow. Our restaurant, in addition to being cool and having good food, it's aesthetically pleasing. It's Instagram worthy. So people would come there just to shoot content, and that's something that we're receptive to, and we understand is that a restaurant is a canvas and it's a backdrop to much more than just the food. So we try to create an environment that's conducive to that.
Yeah, it's when you walk in, you got the sign in the front, right? So before I even knew what the food looked like, I just kept seeing that sign over and over. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, they got the technology thing. They must know that this is a photo op. People are going to post it. People are going to come into it. When that helps it for the marketing from a standpoint of pricing, because we just came from Miami and we went to some really nice restaurants. I'm like, I wonder how they're pricing these things, because I could go somewhere else and it might not be as expensive. Been to your restaurant a few times. It feels like it's mildly priced. And the quality the food is great. It feels like an upscale vibe. How do you guys go about making sure that the pricing stays at a point that you can have a continuous flow of returning customers?
Yeah, so I think, in everyone's head when you go out to a restaurant, most people are prepared to spend $20 for an appetizer and $40 for an entree. And then again, for us, you look at the food costs, you look at the margin on each dish. And sometimes people don't understand, but like if you sell a lobster versus a chicken dish, the lobster might be a lot more money, but as a restaurateur, you're actually making less money percentage-wise on the lobster than you are on a chicken dish. So it's more profitable to sell chicken than it is to sell a lobster, even though it's a higher ticket item to sell the lobster.
Why? Why is that?
It's just the food costs. Lobster, could cook for a dish that sells for $150 could cost you $50. For a chicken, you might buy it for $5 and sell it for $30. So the margin is a lot greater, even though the dollar amount is not. So a lot of people, I think, don't understand that. And for us, obviously, people order what they want, but we try to price things where it makes sense for the business and it makes sense for the customer. It's got to be a happy medium.
So it's just like an eye test. You don't necessarily. It's just like there's no set formula. Okay, this should cost $20. This should cost $30. You just kind of gauge it based off of.
Well, I think proof is kind of in the pudding, and it's based on food costs. So there is a formula to it, but it's not It's when you're doing liquor, I guess there's more of like for wine, for example.
What's the formula? Let's say, okay, if we have whatever chicken saute, right? The chicken, however much that chicken costs, like you do have to do 2 times how much the chicken cost in order to make a profit. Like, what is that actual cost?
So typically you do a food cost for a dish. So let's say the food cost for a particular dish is $5. There's not a formula in terms of like, okay, we're going to mark it up 3 times or 4 times or 5 times. I think, supply and demand, if it's one of your more popular dishes, you could play around with the price and, gradually increase it to a reasonable number. But I think people have a preset understanding of what they're prepared to spend on an appetizer and what they're prepared to spend on an entree. So you try to keep it in that ballpark, and then you put premium dishes on the menu that people are prepared to spend more for.
So let's talk about more marketing. And I guess it goes into the dishes. When you have specialty days, we talk about Valentine's Day. Who's making the decision to say, all right, let's stay culturally relevant. Let's make this feel special. You start naming dishes after songs and after R&B artists. I know you did something in 2023 for the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Who's the deciding factor? And is that you and your team, or is it somebody like one of the waiters like, hey, this is what's happening out there. We need to get involved. We need to make this relevant. We make this popular. Who goes into that decision?
It's definitely a team effort. You listen to your staff, you listen to your partners, you listen to the customers. In the business, your clients become your friends. They become your family. Sometimes I see my clients more than I see my family. So you just listen to people, you take input, you ask questions. So it doesn't come from one place. It's just, understanding your business and understanding your clients.
What's some of the memorable moments that you've had in the restaurant? Like, anything come to mind as far as like highlights?
Yeah, we've had so many. But we've done a lot of memorable moments, but as you mentioned, Fabulous and French Montana did a song about Sei Less about it, a couple years ago, and it was a great tribute to the restaurant and what we've done. We did Fabulous's birthday party, and then we've had the who's who of sports and entertainment. A lot of the European soccer players from Mbappe to Cardi B, 50 Cent, Future, Kevin Hart, Mark Wahlberg. We have a constant flow of different individuals, but we've had a lot of memorable events and moments at the restaurant.
How did the pop-up work out with 50?
So 50 someone that I've had a long relationship with, probably for about 15 years now. And he has a big initiative in Shreveport to move his TV and film production facility there. So he approached us about, doing a pop-up there with him for the weekend that he had in August. So, we obviously believe in what he does and who he is and, the success that he's had. So we were honored to be part of it and support what he's doing.
And how did it work out? It was good?
It was great, yeah. It was a big turnout. I think for the first weekend that he hosted there, it was a big success. And, I think there'll be more opportunities in the future to grow together.
Yeah, I feel like we went to the Sei Less pop-up in Indiana for the All-Star game. Did you? I'm not sure. Was there one in Utah as well?
Yeah.
I think we were at the one in Utah. So we got a thing going, following it. How do you choose where the pop-up's going to be? And you're not everywhere.
Yeah, we're not everywhere. We, NBA All-Star is definitely, easy for us. Everyone that is our clients is in the market at the same time from the sports side, primarily basketball, and then the music artists that are in town. So, I've quickly realized that a lot of these other markets don't know how to cater towards those people. So obviously by having the food there, that's, something that's very attractive to them. But then it's grown more than just the food. It's become like a epicenter for all these people to host parties and after hours. And sometimes I have to pinch myself when it's happening because I'm in the middle of Indiana, and people told me Utah was impossible. And we threw 3 epic, parties in Utah and Indiana.
It was funny. Every night there was a party, but when people ask you what's going on after that, it was like, no, Sei Less. Every night there was a Sei Less party.
We became like the after hours.
Every night.
Yep.
So, but you don't have parties in New York.
Well, there's a party every day at Sei Less. So, but we don't have like pop-up parties in New York now.
But not like a nightlife. Because like Tao, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Turns into a club.
Yeah.
No,
we're a restaurant. But, I think the model has changed. I think the pandemic has pushed it that way where people enjoy going to dinner and having a great vibe rather than going to a club and buying a table. So we have private dining rooms and people come and they vibe out.
So, but from restaurateurs that I've spoke to before, the reason I asked you that question is that a lot of them, they don't want to blur those lines because the nightlife, like real nightlife parties, is a lot that comes with that, right? But some do. Like I said, there are some that have full-fledged clubs inside their restaurant, so their restaurant turns into a club. So what's your thought process on, like, not even just for you, but just for restaurateurs in general, right? Because it is a way to add extra revenue.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it, right? A lot of restaurants struggle. So it's like this is a way to actually add revenue, but there's a lot that's going to come with that could potentially jeopardize your restaurant.
So I think you're right about that. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, how much revenue do you need to add? I think when places are struggling to make ends meet, they go that model, doing a party with a promoter, with bottle service. And like you said, you increase security, increase overhead, increase problems. So, we know that if we do a brunch party or we do a nightlife party, it would probably do well. But I think in the long run, it would jeopardize our business. So that's why we haven't gone that direction. We allow people in the private dining rooms to experience that and curate their own memories on a smaller scale and keep it more exclusive.
Is there, I'm sure, with the success of this one, do you see more in the city and then eventually expanding? I feel like the pop-ups, when you do them, a new community gets a taste of what's happening, right? So like when you're in Indiana, I'm sure at some point it's like, hey, we need to probably maybe bring something back here, there's something here. What is the roadmap for expansion in terms of Sei Less? Yeah,
so we look at all different opportunities, in New York and outside of New York. One thing I've learned through my experiences with other restaurants that I've worked at is the model that works in New York doesn't work everywhere else. charging $22 for a chicken satay might work in New York, but you go to a different market, they're not going to appreciate that.
Not going to fly in Utah.
Yeah. So that's why, I've focused on the pop-up model is, we can go to a market, we could tease it, we could see if it works, and then we could evaluate, does it make sense to, open up here permanently? But for now, I do like the model of, going to a market for a short period of time and opening a pop-up, introducing it to our clients that are in the market and then the local clientele as well.
What's the first city you would go to if it wasn't outside of New York?
I think, there's a few cities that are on the list, but, Las Vegas is obviously the goal for everyone. LA could work, Miami could work, Atlanta, Dallas. I think those are some of the main cities that we would consider.
What about maybe not having another Sei Less, but then a different restaurant?
Yeah.
Is that in the vision board?
Yeah, that's definitely on the drawing board. It's something that we constantly, look into, and I think it's opportunity based. Finding the right space, and then once you have the space, understanding what the business model there will be. Where
do you rank food city? Because I've been all over the map, and I'm a food connoisseur, in my opinion. So I had a ranking of food cities, and I got criticized pretty harshly for it. But I had New York as my number one city, food city. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people didn't fully appreciate it. But the reason why I said that is because I looked at the variety of offerings, right? Like you can get Indian food, you can get Jamaican food, you can get Italian food, and at high levels and in short proximity of each other. And I haven't really seen that level of diversity at the highest level in other cities. But then you got cities like New Orleans who has their own food cuisine. That's kind of, no place in America really has that, right? Like they've kind of curated their own thing. Chicago has always been, well known for their food. So what's your food cities? Like how do you look at New York and just in America, like how do you rank these food cities? Yeah, so I think you're right about, New York is unique in food and in many things that, there's nowhere like New York. And you really realize that when you travel and you see different markets. One thing I think New York has lost since the pandemic is the late night food. I think that's one reason that Sei Less thrives as well, is that we stay open later than most restaurants. I think during the pandemic, people got accustomed to closing at 10 p.m. for some reason, and they haven't gone back to staying open later. I don't know if the economics just don't make sense for them, but the more restaurants that are closed after 10 p.m., the better it is for us because we stay open later. How open?
So our kitchen's open till midnight during the week and 1 a.m. on weekends, but we consistently cater towards our clients, our VIPs, and we push that a little later if need be.
Yeah, it is kind of annoying because a lot of restaurants do close at 10 o'clock, and I was wondering why. So that was just the residue of the pandemic, and they just...
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of 24-hour spots that are not 24 hours anymore, and a lot of places that used to be open until midnight that close at 10 now. So obviously, there's a reason they do it, but our model works the way it is, and we'll continue to do it.
How stressful has it been? Obviously, being in the space during the pandemic, being a manager to now being an owner, I know the hours have got to be ridiculous. From that point to now, how has that? Has there been a balance, or what's the stress level and tolerance for it at this period?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been accustomed for the last 10 years working 6 days a week, holidays, weekends. So putting the time and the work in is not the problem. I started a family during the pandemic, so I had a child right before I opened Sei Less and another one right after. So balancing that has been the most challenging part for me is the work-life balance of raising a family as well as grooming Sei Less, which I consider my other child.
Yeah, and then as you're doing that, you got to build a team. And so sometimes when you do something so great, you have a great team with you, and that team decides, hey, you know what, I'm so great that maybe I want to venture off on my own. How has that been for you?
Well, I think, you got to value your employees. I think some of my previous bosses didn't do that with me. So I understand the importance of, if having a good team, keeping the team intact and appreciating the people that you work with. So just, communication, asking people questions, making sure that if there's something that's bothering them, they could openly talk about it with you. And then just trying to build a positive culture and, being open-minded.
How important is it to have like other stems off of the main tree for you? Like, do you have sauce that you sell in stores or like a cookbook or is it just focused on just the restaurant itself?
Yeah, so there's definitely things like that that I've been working on, throughout the process of Sei Less being open. Condiment line is definitely one of them. Celebrity partnerships with different people, merch and apparel, pop-ups. So they kind of all intertwine together, but without having Sei Less and the flagship in New York being successful, none of that other stuff works. So some of the other brands I work with, they got away from that and they were too worried about trying to do other things and they forgot about, the flagship. So, I definitely focus on making sure that the New York location continues to thrive, and then we work on different things outside of that as well.
Is there camaraderie in that space, right? It feels like, a lot of business is cutthroat, but especially in a space where it's competition, right? Like I'm having customers and unique customers. Like, do you have peers in this space is kind of what I'm saying, right? Like, obviously there's restaurant groups that have their own people. You're doing something very different, very unique. Is there competition in this space, like how we were perceived in sports?
Yeah, so I don't look at it as competition. I think, if you do good work and you believe in what you do and who you are, you're going to succeed. I think sometimes people get too caught up in worrying about what other people are doing. I do believe that we have a niche in what we do, and we stick to that, and I think we conquer it pretty well. But there's different business models and different cuisines and different, concepts that, I respect what other people are doing. Do I look at it as competition? Indirectly maybe, but people are going to eat where they're comfortable and where they like the food and they like the vibe and they have a relationship. So at the end of the day, I think it's building relationships, making sure people are comfortable and having great food. Yeah. And the white glove service and, doing more than just taking people's reservations and feeding them, being available and, being accessible. I think that's a big part of what I do and what I've done over the last 10 years in terms of building relationships is, being available and accessible.
The white glove service. I asked that because I wonder, as you're building and you're watching restaurants being open, is there somebody that you can bounce ideas from? Or you might frequent a restaurant and said, hey, you know what? I like that flower arrangement. How can we add that or incorporate that into something we're doing?
Yeah, so, my partners and I, we definitely, you're not reinventing the wheel. You see what works in other places, in other cities, in other countries, and you see how you could incorporate that into your business model.
So, what's the ratio for you as far as success, as far as people that have reservations and people that just walk in? Like, how many tables you have?
We seat about probably 275 people.
So 275 people. So it's like, do you try to have 40% nightly reservations and then open it up for 60 on the walk-in, or does that? How does that?
Yeah, so we don't look at it as percentages. We try to maximize the amount of reservations we could take ahead of time. You get no-shows, which is part of the process. We call to confirm, we take credit cards, but naturally there's a percentage of people that just don't make it to the reservation for a variety of different reasons. And then we have our regular clients that we book through our phones and, relationships we have. Then there's people that book private events through our events team. And then we have walk-ins. So there's a combination of all, but I think, there's a pretty good formula where, you take X amount of reservations, you take X amount of walk-ins, and then you take another percentage of reservations that come through our cell phones, on a nightly basis.
So how do you keep a reservation? I always wondered that. Like, if I say I want a reservation at 9:00, if there's if there's an empty table, that's easy to accommodate. But if the restaurant's full, then you're actually working on a mathematical equation that somebody's going to finish at 9:00, right? Mm-hmm. But there's no guarantee that these tables are going to finish. So I've seen some restaurants that put time limits on, but most don't.
Yeah, so we technically have a 90-minute dining limit.
So you have time limits.
We technically do, and we only exercise that time limit when it's necessary. Obviously, if there's no need to ask for someone to get up, then we let people stay there as long as they want and enjoy the restaurant and the meal. But if there's people waiting for tables and obviously you finished your meal, you finished dessert, you're just sitting there, you're not consuming any drinks. Sometimes we offer people, hey, can we get you a drink to move you to the bar? There's some people waiting for tables. There's a way of going about doing it. But generally, it works out for us. We have a large restaurant, a lot of seats. There's different models, different kinds of restaurants. Some restaurants only have 50 seats. So I think with a restaurant like that, it's a lot more important to really map out your restaurant and each seating, But we're in New York City, so as you know, you could be planning on getting somewhere by 9 o'clock. You take an Uber and you get there at 9:27. A lot of restaurants, they'll tell you, sorry, like we had to give your table away. We do have the flexibility of pivoting and, just saying, hey, grab a drink at the bar. We'll get you seated as soon as we have something available.
Oh yeah, why do guys do this? This started during the pandemic also, where if you make a reservation for 6 people and you come with 4, they won't sit you until 6 people come. That started during the pandemic. I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me though. Because I feel like if I'm coming with 4 people, even if the 2 other people don't come, like the reservation is still gonna.
Well, I don't think it started during the pandemic. It probably became more prevalent during the pandemic. But if your reservation for 6 people and there's only 4 of you there and we seat you down, and now 30 minutes later you tell us, oh, the other 2 people aren't going to make it. So now we gave you a table that could fit 6 people for 4 people. You already started. We can't move you. Or those other 2 people show up 30 minutes later. And now you've been sitting there for 30 minutes. You didn't order any food. And those other people get there. Now you've been there for 30 minutes, but we need the table back in 90 minutes. So you only have 60 minutes with all 6 of you. And now the 2 people that came are like, why are they rushing us? So even though they were late, it becomes the restaurant's fault that we rushed them, even though we gave you an hour and a half, but you got there late, and now all you remember is that we rushed you out of the table because we needed it back. So, obviously there are exceptions to every rule, but, generally seating in complete parties works the best because everyone sits down together, you order your appetizers, you order your entrees. There's a lot of nuances like, not allowing a table to just order appetizers and then when they get the appetizers and then order the entree afterwards, because it screws up the flow in the kitchen. When the kitchen gets a ticket, they got to see the appetizers and the entrees so they could start planning. If there's a filet mignon that's medium well, they need extra time to cook that, and they might start preparing that a little bit ahead of time to understand that, the entrees can come out all together, because not every dish takes the same amount of time to prepare. So having the full order when you sit down helps the kitchen, streamline everything and get the food out efficiently.
Is there a retention rate that you focus on for returning customers? Like in restaurants, you become a valued customer, and then like Ryu, I remember like that you can only go, you can't even make a reservation. You got to be a valued customer. Do you guys have that or plan to do that at some time in the future?
Yeah, there's different technologies that track that kind of stuff for you. We do get a high percentage of our clientele that are, I guess, family, and they text us and they call us to make reservations. So we have a lot of regulars that come once a week, a couple times a month. So we do prioritize those people, in terms of making sure that we always have availability for them. It doesn't always work perfect. One of our big problems is that a lot of people want private dining, and sometimes there's not enough private dining available. So, someone might want to come at 10 o'clock. We say, hey, listen, we don't have anything at 10, but if you come at 11:30, and it might sound crazy to eat dinner at 11:30, but we're in New York City. There's a lot of people that want to eat before they go out afterwards.
Yeah, you go to a concert, you got to eat after.
Yep.
In terms of customers, what about in terms of the menu? How often are you switching it out, or do we keep the menu as the menu, or is there something that's not performing? Is there retention that goes inside the decision making when it comes to what we're actually serving?
Yeah, I would say, we stick with like the 80-20 rule. So 80% of our menu is, our staples. And then 20% of it we analyze and, look at the numbers, and you get feedback from customers to see how we can improve those items. So we're always trying to innovate and add new dishes, but we don't do specials. We don't, pay attention to certain dishes more. It's just, what dishes can we add to improve the menu and the guest experience?
So what's more important to the bottom line, liquor or food?
I think it's a combination of both, but, if you're selling a lot of liquor, you're making a lot of money.
Higher profit margins on liquor than it is on food.
Yes.
So that's the priority. What's more important?
Yeah, if you're a bar, obviously it's the liquor.
You gotta have food because it's a restaurant, but
we probably sell 65% of our revenues is food, and 35% is liquor. But obviously maximizing what you sell on liquor will make you more profitable.
Yeah.
So what's the future vision for you when it comes to Sei Less, and anything just outside of Sei Less as well? Like what's on your vision board?
So continuing to build out the brand, continuing to look into future expansion, seeing if there's opportunities to do merch, opportunities to collabs, down the road, maybe membership club, down the road, maybe boutique hotel. So always exploring different opportunities. But again, I've realized over the years working in this business that what you do in New York doesn't work in every market. So continue to do pop-ups to understand different markets and seeing where there might be a fit and understanding where we could pivot, with different cuisines or, different parallels that we could do with the Sei Less brand that would work in different markets as well as New York.
How about internationally?
International, I think doing pop-ups internationally is something that we would do pretty quickly. And then determining what markets we would do, a permanent location in. There's obviously opportunities in the Middle East and London and Paris. Those all sound great, but, duplicating what you do in New York, it could be another concept in New York is not easy. And obviously, I commend a lot of the restaurant groups that are able to expand to different markets and, duplicate what they do in different markets. And it's something that we plan on doing and we will do, but it's, identifying what opportunity is right because, at the end of the day, you have so many resources and so much time. So making sure that you allocate your time and resources in the right places.
This is tough. I mean, obviously as a restaurant owner, but how much do you consume the product?
Not as much as people probably think. I've been working with this food for about 15 years.
Right.
So I'll order things on the menu that most people probably wouldn't think of right away just when they sit down. Chicken sautés, I've had so many of those in my life that they don't excite me anymore. But I do get why people get excited. And when I do have one, it reminds me. But I try different things on the menu just to make sure that the food quality and the taste, sometimes the sauce is not right. And give feedback to the chef just so he understands, what you see and what you hear. And then obviously listening to the customers. As I mentioned, a lot of our customers are regulars. So they're familiar with the dishes. Not just our restaurant, but the restaurants that are competing with us that are similar to our restaurant. So, it's very important to make sure that, the sauces taste right and the consistency is good and the presentation is good because people know the food and they know what else is out there.
There you have it. Well, appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Anything that you want to say before we wrap?
Thank you for having me. If you haven't been to Sei Less, we're located a few blocks from Madison Square Garden and Times Square in the heart of Manhattan. We're located at 156 West 38th Street, and our handle is at Sei Less NYC, SEILESS NYC.
Yeah. 3-year anniversary, January 15th, you said?
Correct.
I got a drink idea called Earn Your Leisure.
All right. Say less.
Say less. All right, God, thank you for rocking with us. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.